Hello, everyone. Now I'm going to start off by talking about the Fusion environment and the different tools and the different basically user interface for the Fusion software. The first thing is our data panel. So over on the left, we have a list of all of our projects, and then this is also where we can navigate to files. If you do not see the data panel, there is a expansion icon, this little grid over here. If you click that, it'll either close or open the data panel. Once you're in the data panel, you can pin or unpin projects, depending on if you want them to be at the top or not. And then you can go ahead and open a project by double clicking on it. And that will take you into the project where we may have folders. And then we can navigate, for example, to a puzzle cube. And then I've got all of the parts here. It is important to note that as you save the files, they're going to go ahead and version. So you can see these small little version tabs in the lower right hand corner of each of the files that I've got, which can help, if there's changes, and especially if you're working on a team, to be able to track what the changes are. If you expand that, you also have a set of options to be able to look at the older versions and pull and open them up if you want. And then the data panel houses both the drawings, it houses the components and the files there. Both ends up being the same type of file, whether it is an individual component or an assembly of components, which is kind of nice because then you don't have to keep track of as many different file types. And then in those, you can also have like your rendering information or your everything except for your drawing basically is inside of that one file. And then your drawing files are the one piece that's separate. So that is the data panel. The next piece just to the right is going to be our browser. It says it at the top. If you don't see the browser, it may be collapsed. You have to open that up. And then the browser has different folders. So the default one in this case is our origin. So then you can go ahead and if you hover over any of the origin planes or the axes or the origin itself, they'll highlight and you can make them visible or invisible depending on if you want to turn that on or off with these little eyeball icons. And then as you create components and sketches, it will add folders for each of those. So if I go ahead and open, let's say, the assembly, then you're going to see each of the components has its own folder. And then if I expand that, then each component also has an origin folder, the bodies, the sketches, and you can turn those on and off and navigate all of that from the browser. Additionally, this is where we can set up our units from inch to metric if we need to change that. And then for our views later on when we're creating different, if you want to make special views, you can. Otherwise, you can click on these to go to the different sides. And you'll notice that this corresponds with the name up here, which brings us to another key feature. So here is what's called the view cube, or sometimes I'll refer to it as the navigation cube. It is basically it's a visualization of the plane or of the view of your object and the different sides of the object as you've defined them. So the front of our object, the top of our object, the right of our object. There's the axes, so our y-axis, our x-axis, and our z-axis. Just to zoom in, you can see those all here. And then depending if you click on like the lower edge, it's going to spin around so that part is facing you on whichever kind of side that you want to view. Anytime you get turned around, you can always click back on the little house, which is your home view, and get back to that. minimize part of my browser. Now, if you right-click on your with your mouse, it's going to pull up your marking menu. This is a shortcut to any of the tools that you'd want at any point. So in this case, if we want to delete something, if we want to make a sketch, this gives us a way to very quickly decide what tools we're going to use, what we want to make. And then what's interesting is that it will change what selections are available as you go along. So in this case, first, if I right-click, I want to start a sketch. I move down, click on Sketch. Then it's going to give me the option of picking a tool. So in this case, maybe I want to start off with a line. So I keep moving down, click there, and that pulls up my construction planes or origin planes, and then I can select a object there or a place to draw my sketch, for example. So it can be a very quick way to navigate the different tools, and there's some shortcuts that you can learn with the marking menu. All right, down at the bottom, we have the comment bar. So go into a design again. So down here in the comments, you can always open that, and this is really a tool for collaboration where if I want to basically review another person's design, then I could add comments either for myself or for somebody else as to the changes I made or why I adjusted some hole. You can end up taking a capture image to take a picture, so in case you need to send an email to somebody about the specific changes you made, something along those lines. And then what's cool about this is it interfaces with our web design files, and we can both do comments locally and also on the web. So that can be expanded there. That's our comments area. The timeline, which is down at the bottom here, is the timeline for each of the events in a particular design. Now, in this case, this is an assembly of a number of components, and so these are like links of components. This was when I grounded the very first component, and I can kind of scroll through with this little icon to see back, take steps back to where I'm assembling the cube, and I can see the entire history of the construction of an object inside Fusion by adjusting, moving forward and backwards in that. Additionally, let's say I'm in a component itself. So if I have a component here, in this case we've got the timeline, if I move backwards there, I can make parts of the component appear and disappear. Or let's say I need to adjust part of the dimensions on something. Well, I can double click on, say, the sketch in this case, and then I could theoretically redefine, some of those, constraints or something along those lines. So I can adjust the design by going into a sketch or into an extrusion. For example, here, I may want to adjust the length of this extrusion from 1.5 to, say, 1.75. And then it's going to grow. And I can make adjustments by going into previous steps in the timeline. All right. So from there, we're going to look at the navigation display. So down here, we have a couple different tools that help us navigate in our work area. So the orbit tool, the pan tool, zooming in and out. Ultimately, with these different views, you can go ahead and click on them. That's going to enable a tool. And then for the orbit tool, for example, you can then spin the objects around. In general, I like to use a mouse with my CAD work. I recommend doing that. You'll kind of drive yourself crazy with the trackpad, but you can get by clicking on these. But otherwise, there are kind of shortcuts. So, for example, if to access these tools, so if I push the scroll wheel, I can get the hand or pan tool and move around. The scroll wheel allows me to zoom in and out. And if I hold the shift button and push the scroll wheel button, I can then spin the object the same way Orbit does. But otherwise, down at the bottom, you can adjust that. You can turn on and off your grid lines. You can make your different views. I like to work in an orthographic view for everything, but you could do a perspective view and kind of change the way that your objects look and are viewed in this area. The toolbar at the top, this is really where you're going to spend most of your time, is dealing with all of these tools here. So the first thing on the left is your workspace. If you click on this, you've got these different workspaces, which then pull up different types of tools for our for the space and for the adjustments we're going to make. So, for example, if I'm going to render and make this look real nice, I'd go to my render workspace. In general, we'll do almost all of our work in the design workspace, but there are more options: design, generative design, rendering, animation, simulation, and manufacture, or our CAM workspace. And then the drawings is a little special because this is how you kick off a drawing from a design or from an animation. But it's important to know that if you look up here and you don't see the tools that you expect, it might be that you're in the wrong workspace. So we're in the design workspace and we've got these different tools. You'll notice that there is an arrow below this, or below these tools. These are kind of like your most common, your workflow from left to right in general. But you can click here and it's going to give you a whole bunch more tools and options to navigate and to use while you're building your models, or under the modify, a whole list of tools and so on. Additionally, there are tabs up here for the type of modeling that we're doing. For this class, we'll just be doing solid modeling, but there are options for doing sheet metal or for doing surface modeling, and each of these is different types of modeling that then you can navigate up top. Once again, if you don't see the tools that you're used to, then it's possible that you're just on the wrong tab or in the wrong workspace. So these are all our tools. You'll notice that if you hover over a tool, it'll first say the name of the tool. Then if you wait a little longer, it will give you a definition of what that tool is, which can be very handy to explain, what extrude or what revolve is. You'll also notice that extrude E, that E in the parentheses, is actually a shortcut. So if you hit E on the keyboard, you can quickly go and switch to the extrude tool. And so that is our toolbar. The other one that I use a whole lot is the inspect, where if I need to make a measurement on a side, and then I can click on it and it'll tell me the length of an object. That one's pretty common. All right. So I already went over the view cube. The one other thing is that you can reassign the front or top views if you want in this, as well as your home. If you need to, you can go to a side. Let's say I wanted to redefine this as my front. If I right click, then I can say set current view as front, and it will redefine the cube that way, and it'll redefine the object for when you're doing drawings. I'm going to go ahead and set this, reset that back. And you can do the same thing with your home view to readjust that by right-clicking on the view cube and setting a new home. So in case you build your model in a way that doesn't have the right front and right and top views, you can always adjust it by right-clicking on your view cube. Lastly, we've got our application bar up top. That's where you've got your file, save, any of the undo which I usually just use Control Z. But you can find your files, save them, do a save as, export, each of those in the file dropdown, and then you've got over here on the right your preferences and the different kind of user icons, as well as a help and some other options up there. Now, the last thing is our main workspace. We refer to this as the canvas, so similar to artists painting. They paint on a canvas. CAD artists also work on a canvas, but in this case, it is the Fusion canvas, the 360, 3D modeling canvas. And as I mentioned before, you can turn on and off the grid modes and change your views down here if you feel like it. I generally leave it as its defaults. I like the layout grid, and I like to see those. It helps me orient my eye when I'm dealing with more complex designs. And that is pretty much it for navigating the Fusion environment. The one other thing I would mention is all of these designs, they're not saved on your computer. And they are, they can be, and they can be backed up to your computer, but really they're going to be backing up to the cloud. And this is really nice for sharing designs and for sharing the different projects that you make, and then also for being able to move from workstation to workstation without carrying around a computer necessarily. And you can access this if you click on the version. They'll say like view details on web. You've got some options there. So if I click here, I could say view on web, and then that's going to go ahead and launch that item. And in here, I can then navigate for my web Fusion designs. If I go into the same project, for example, then I could find, cube parts or look at these drawings, look at these models. I could actually see them in 3D if I want. So take a look at that in 3D. And this is where I can put my comments and review the parts and so on as well, especially with shared designs. And even if I don't have Fusion, this stuff is still accessible for markup and for, saying like, oh, well, let's go ahead and, measure this side. How long was this side? And then you can, make measurements and then figure out, well, this is about 22.5 millimeters, and so on and so forth. All right. So that's the rundown on the navigation and the different work environments for Fusion 360. Have a great day.